For some reason, that moment in the car chatting with these people really clicked for me of, oh, wow, these are my people. And maybe what it was thinking on that moment was realizing it didn't happen overnight.
Hello, I'm your host, Sam East, and welcome to Diverse, a SWE podcast. Today, we're talking about something that doesn't always come up in engineering school: how hard it can be to find your people once you leave college and enter the workforce. Our guest is Roma-Hossain, a systems engineer at Mammotome, who moved to a new city during the pandemic, started a new job, and found herself facing a challenge that many of us can relate to. How do you build real friendships and support networks as an adult, especially as a woman in engineering? Maria, this is such a relatable topic. I'm sure a lot of people, this will resonate with them. Welcome to Diverse.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's rewind to the beginning here, that transitional period from collegiate to professional life. Can you kind of detail what that period was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied at the University of Michigan, so a pretty large school, a very large engineering school. I studied mechanical engineering, a very big program, right? So I was just surrounded by people. And I would say in my collegiate life, it was just everywhere I turned, there was an opportunity. And really, my whole life, I've been the type of person to say yes to things, to get involved in things. And so, college, high school, really my whole academic career was a busy time for me, saying yes to both academic opportunities, but also getting involved in extracurriculars. And I was involved somewhat in the SWE group at Michigan, but there were just so many different things to do. It was sort of just one of the many ways that I was getting involved. So then fast forward to 2019 is when I graduated, and I started at my first job out of school. That was kind of not what I expected to be doing. I was doing a traveling role. So I was living in different cities for really an unknown amount of time. And I was always kind of traveling in and out of those cities for my first role was kind of a consulting contracting setup. And it was a good transition. I think I was well equipped for that right out of school. I was used to, traveling, living out of a suitcase. And so that was good. But then, unexpectedly, not even a full year into my working career, it was the pandemic. And that was definitely not the time to be in a role where you're traveling all the time. So that was kind of a crazy surprise for, at a time in my life where I was just sort of trying to figure out, okay, what was I going to do next? Where was I going to end up? I was enjoying the ability to travel, the ability to kind of take some time. And then it was all of a sudden oh, okay, maybe I do want to pick where I'm going to live and settle somewhere. And so I ended up moving to Cincinnati, where my now husband, he was living there, and I had previously done internships there. So I felt like I had a good network there, even though that's not where I'm from. I'm from Michigan. I moved there in December of 2020, so peak COVID, not really the time people were out socializing. And it's hard to separate for me. Was it just the time of it all of the pandemic, or was it just kind of inherent to when you're starting somewhere that is not the type of like I described, big school, things just kind of all around you, which element was it, or just kind of all at once, just that realization of oh, I have a lot more free time and I'm not seeing people as naturally. This is something I'm really going to have to reflect on and think on, what is this going to look like and how am I going to get involved in this totally new environment. So yeah, that's a little bit about that period of my life.
That sounds like a period of extreme change and growth. And it sounds like some realizations as well. How do you think not just the role, but the role coming about during the pandemic changed how you see your working life?
I've said this often as I was reflecting early on in this role, like talking to like co-ops and students who, had summer internships, I would say the one thing I did not think about very much as a student, like when I was in engineering school, I would think about my job and what I wanted that to look like and what sort of like technical skills I wanted to have and what sort of industry I might want to work in. But it sounds so silly, but I never thought like, oh, it's also going to be a part of like my life and what do I want my life to look like and where do I want to live? Do I want to be in a big city or a little city? Like, do I want to be at a big company or a little company? Not for like professional reasons, but more for just like culture fit reasons. What is the culture of the company? Like, those were all questions I don't think I thought very much about, that became a lot more important to me in that first role.
No, it sounds like you had a real reckoning with your work-life balance, what you want your professional life to look like and your personal life to look like.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because previously it was like, okay, you go, you work for a summer, you try something out, and you move on to the next thing. Like everything in life was a little more naturally cyclical. And I think it was realizing like, oh, like they will change. You will have like periods and phases in your life just the same, but that it's more on your own terms and on your own timing and not something that's just going to naturally change. Like you have to kind of build that in for yourself if that's something that you want.
And why do you think it is harder to make friends or even feel connected to new people as an adult, especially when you're at work?
Yeah. So I guess first, just like it's harder to make friends as an adult, period, right? I think because of those things that I mentioned, because it's just you're not surrounded by people your own age. You're not like
Mhm,
constantly being presented with opportunities where people are in that mindset of like, oh, I'm new
mhm,
here, you're new here. Like maybe we'll, you expect to make friends at certain points in your life and young adulthood, everyone's more in like different places in their journey, right? Like maybe they're back
mhm.
in their hometown and they've got their hometown friends and they're not really like putting themselves out there, right? So I think that it applies whether it's at work or not at work. But I guess to address work specifically, I think that can be just a different experience, I guess, on like how big the company is. Like some companies, right? Like you may join and they may have like new hire programs or like some structure there for you to feel more connected. And then some places you might have to kind of forge your own path and make that for yourself. And I think work just, it gets even more tricky than just simply like making friends or not even friends, but just like connections as an adult because, there's like reporting structure or like professional relationship, like there's just like more factors at play there that might make people less apt to like open up in a natural kind of way.
Yeah, and so then how would you approach then these barriers? How would you overcome them when it comes to connecting to new people? We've had so many amazing chats on this podcast, including, talking to engineers who might be a little more shy or introverted. So how do you overcome the
hmm
barriers?
I was thinking about that. Like, I feel like in some ways I relate very much to the like not super outgoing, shy
Hmm.
engineer, right? But in some ways, like I have this tendency to just like say yes to things. So, whichever one of those you find yourself in, whether you're more apt to put yourself out there or you're not, I think it's realizing that like it can't hurt to ask or like you never know until you ask the question or put yourself out there like to bring it to like my like SWE experience or my experience like at my company starting in 2020 like specifically like a group of us who are all involved with SWE like at the time like didn't exist. It took us all like responding to this email being like, are you a SWE member? And we're like, yes. And then us starting to ask questions of, well, hey, but what if we got together? What if we asked for some support and like forming a group? Like it was just questions that you ask and you're like, well, maybe there will be support for like starting up this activity, or it doesn't even have to be like a formal ERG. Maybe it's like, oh, like I wonder if this person would want to like go to lunch with me, or go take a walk at lunch, or whatever that like thing is that kind of takes it beyond just like a 5 minute like conversation in passing to a more like, let's make a little bit more time to like chat and get to know this person, like whatever that looks like, whether it's like a formal group or not. Just the barrier and like the way to break it down is just ask, and the worst you're going to get is no, and that's okay. And but like maybe people will be into it, and you never know until you ask.
I love that. Applies to so many areas of life, but especially when it comes to meeting people. There's this philosophy, a saying that your job is not your family, your coworker is not really your friends. How do you personally see that? And also, what boundaries would you enforce between people you meet at work and in your personal life?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and something that every person I think is gonna have to come to their own conclusions and find what works for them. But I think first and foremost, like, and this didn't come naturally to me, I think at first, people are humans. And the reason I say like maybe that didn't come naturally is because, when you're a younger engineer, it can sometimes feel like these people around you know more than you. And
Mm,
there's this like scared feeling of like, oh, like my coworkers, like they've really got it figured out. Like they're adults. I'm not adult. And like this is scary, right? And or maybe like if you are reporting to someone and are like, "Ooh, like that's my boss. Like they've got it all figured out." Realizing naturally like you are going to start as the youngest person. Everyone around you is going to have a little more experience. And just realizing like they're still humans too, right? And starting with like respecting and getting to know people first that way, I
mhm,
think is a good way to like start thinking about this, right? And then I think once you start getting to know people and start like not being like afraid to like open up a little bit yourself or like get to know people and what's going on both like in their work life and outside of their work life, then I think you'll find that maybe like some of those are naturally people that you might be friends with, like outside of work.
mm,
And great,
mhm,
like that doesn't have to change the way that you interact with them at work. Just like if you are like, oh, this isn't someone who I would probably be friends with outside of work, but I still have to work with them and I still have to give them equal respect. It's like, I guess if you want to call it a boundary, maybe, but like just a mentality of like just treating everyone the same, whether it's somebody that you naturally would gravitate towards outside of work or not. Like, I think that's
mm,
important. But then maybe, like, if you do find yourself like forming a closer relationship or things are just more natural with that one person, you can also like decide and say like, I'm gonna, see some friends outside of work, or maybe certain people are gonna be closer to me, but that doesn't mean that you always need to like explain everything that's going on in your personal life to like that person or every person at work. Like you can also draw boundaries at work for you of like if you are like, oh, I have this weird schedule, like I need to like leave early or come in early, or are people going to be asking me about that? Or, maybe in a more like bigger kind of life way, like maybe you have some like sensitive life news, like you're considering moving to a new city, or you might be thinking about having a baby, or just something big that might like impact your personal life and something that you would like be really open with to like a friend outside of work. Like maybe those are situations where you're going to think, okay, like I don't need to be an open book all the time, and I can think about like the information that I want to share about my personal life to like people at work. So I think, there's things to consider boundaries wise there. But yeah, really, I would just say, treating everybody equally and trying a little bit to get to know people more than just like in your professional relationship, I think will really benefit your life and then your work life as well.
So once you move from that sort of initial, getting to know, setting the boundaries, kind of figuring out your groove with that person that you may be connecting with, how do you figure out, oh, these are my people? Was there a turning point for you where you're like you're starting to feel connected with your coworkers beyond that sort of surface level conversation.
Yeah. I guess to take it back to my whole, like, entering after COVID journey, like, I have this really episodic memory. We were in the car. It was, I'm not even sure what month, but it was in 2021. And a group of four of us were headed to Indianapolis from Cincinnati for the SWE conference in 2021.
Mhm.
And for some reason, that like moment in the car, chatting with these people, like really clicked for me of like, oh wow, like these are my people. And maybe what it was, like thinking on that moment was realizing like it didn't happen overnight, right? So that I needed to have some patience, that I wasn't going to walk into this new job on day one, like, and magically have this like, oh, you're gonna be like a close work friend. It wasn't who I expected. Like these women we did like formed this connection slowly. They were from different departments in the company. They weren't people that I worked with every day. But yeah, it was like finding them in unexpected ways. And I don't know how to describe the feeling, but it was just like a comfort of this way we could switch between like it was easy to chat with them about life things, things outside of work, things inside of work, what it was like getting started at this company. That it just felt like a safe and natural conversation. I don't know. I think those were all like the feelings I had in those moments. And that was really helpful to me to then like to have that experience, to go to the conference with them, to get to know them, and then to start to realize like people talk about like, oh, build your network and get to know your people. But until you see just the way that I felt so much more engaged and like I had a place to turn to then like it wasn't immediate, but let's say, a few months later, I had like a topic that I was really chewing over or something that it was like, oh, it would be helpful for someone who like kind of knows like, a little bit about like what I do at work, like enough to like talk with me about this work topic, but maybe isn't like my direct team. Like it's really helpful to have those type of people. But yeah, I really go back to that. Like whatever it is for you, it doesn't necessarily have to be a sweet conference. I know I'm like on the sweet podcast here, but it could be anything. But just that moment of like comfort is what I felt.
Yeah, I think once you sort of make that leap from, yes, you're still work friends, but there's a personal element to it outside of work.
Yeah, for sure.
From your experiences, how can employee resource groups and SWE sections help to build that sense of camaraderie, the network, the belonging, which could even impact employee retention?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess to touch on like my experience specifically with employee resource groups. So when I started Mammotome, Mammotome's under the Danaher umbrella. They work with SWE and like we're for a time like sponsoring our SWE memberships. And so that was sort of the catalyst for us to get involved. And then a few of us found each other and said, oh, hey, like I didn't realize like there were people who are also parts of SWE and also at my company. And then it was like together that we realized like, oh, we could form this like employee resource group, or we call it like an associate led group. Like we can all start to get together over this common connection. And so I not only can recognize like the value of the group, but I can also recognize like the experience of one, like realizing that it doesn't exist and it could exist, and then like getting it off the ground and figuring out like, oh, okay, like what do we even want to do? Like what's important to us? How they help to build that sense of belonging and camaraderie. Like it is a place that is purposefully like bringing together people who, share like some common background, but might be kind of spread out, right, across different projects, across different like departments. So it's a good way to like bring people together. Oftentimes, like it's hard to put yourself out there. It's hard to make time and space for like this sort of connection. And I think what an ERG can do is just kind of break down that first barrier by being like, okay, well, that's like the point of this. Like you're all in this room right now to talk to each other. It's like it kind of
Mm.
sets you up for that. And I think, like I said, I'm a little more apt to like say yes to things, be a little more like putting myself out there. And then I think as a ERG leader, it's important to say, okay, well, not everyone is like that. Like, not everyone is going to be okay with saying yes when they don't really understand what it's going to entail for whatever reason, whether that's like they just are like a little more shy or not as outgoing, or maybe they're in a point in their personal life where they've got like a lot going on and they just don't have the time, the mental space, and the mental energy to like make purposeful time for connection, but everybody needs it just as equally. And so I think as an ERG leader, it's important to think about like creating an approachable and like inclusive space, whatever that activity is going to be, whatever you're going to do as a group, like make that at a time that it's easy for people to come to. If you're going to pick topics, like try to pick relatable topics. And then, yeah, I think then in my experience, I felt like the group has just helped be a space for people to connect and get to know each other. One other thing to go back to that theme of like, you're a young engineer, you're starting out, everyone feels like they've got it together, especially the people above you. Another like great benefit I found in ERGs is that it's a space to see your leaders interacting as people. It's like you all kind of put your titles at the door and you realize just how much more you have in common
Mhm,
with
mhm,
people who you otherwise might be like, "Ooh, like they've really been doing this for a long time," or they're in
mhm.
whatever kind of
Intimidated by
role.
them.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And so it's a good place to break down some of those barriers and get to know people, even people that are you might think are like, quote, way above you in the structure or whatever.
So once there is a SWE section or employee resource group that you've detailed here, how can that group scale and attract more people? They've laid the foundation down and now they want to keep growing, keeping more inclusive. How do you think they should approach that?
Yeah. So, like I said, I've been involved with, like, I guess speed groups of different sizes, right? Like, I have been involved at my group at Mammotome, which at its peak, I think maybe got to like 30 or so people, like, which still on the grand scheme of things, like, relatively small. I'm also involved in like the South Ohio chapter, right? And that's like a lot bigger. I don't know the numbers. And then, when I was in college, like that group was a lot bigger. And so I think there is this like challenge that comes that I've seen, like when I think about like the South Ohio chapter or the University of Michigan chapter, like as it grows and scales, it can almost become a little more difficult to get to know people because it's like, it's amazing to have like the people and the resources. Like that's great, but it's also can then create this sense of like you show up and then you're like, oh my gosh, like there's so many people here. Like, how am I even going to get to know people? So I think
Mm.
it's like, it's hoping that people still give you a little bit of patience and knowing that like it might take a couple times of coming to things to really feel like you've made a more personal connection within the group. But I think thinking on the organizer side of like what can you do to like enable people to feel more comfortable as the group grows, as it becomes a little less immediately like this like small welcoming environment, meeting people at like times that they're free, trying to make it like as low lift as possible to like keep coming to things. And then one thing we've been talking about more in like the South Ohio side is like, can we help connect people who have maybe another common thread? So when you think about like a employee resource group at your company, it's like, well, we all have this common thread of like working at this company. But as that group grows, or maybe you're at a bigger company than I am, where it's like even just that common thread, maybe it's like, well, gee, like you're in a completely different department. Like start to think about like other ways you can help facilitate like connection. So like we've been talking in our South Ohio group, like we've got Cincinnati and we've got Dayton, which are two different cities. And it's like we've got neighborhoods within those cities. It's like maybe we start to like give people opportunities to say, hey, I live on like this side of the city, or hey, I am a young professional. Like, SWE's done that with like affinity groups, right? So I think that's a good maybe branch. Then it kind of gives people that jumping off point to be like, oh, well, okay, we're not only just both in this group or both in SWE, but we're also like interested in XYZ topic, or we have young kids, or I don't know, whatever that is. That can be another good way to keep people involved and like build the like big and small community.
Maria, you've had such valuable insights on the importance of making these connections. Before we let you go, if there is, someone listening to this right now thinking, I really wish I had that kind of community at work, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, I think patience. Life is long.
Mm,
And it feels like it's going by slowly, especially like I feel like that transitionary period where I was like newly in the working world and just like adjusting to this new schedule, this new cadence of life. Like it can feel slow, but also fast. I don't know how to explain it,
mm,
but patience is a big message I would give that like these new friendships, these new networks that you have, whatever it is, you move to a new city, whatever that looks like for you, new job, it's not going to happen overnight. So be patient and like things will grow in their own time. Put yourself out there, whatever that looks like for you. It can be in a way that's approachable for you, but just asking the question. Like you never know what the answer might be. And generally, I think you'll find people are a lot more like open, receptive, like glad that you asked, whatever it
mm,
is. So put yourself out there and ask. And if you don't see something, like if you're like, oh, I really loved the like XYZ group that I did in college or in high school, like, and you don't see one of those, like, start asking around. Maybe it starts with like just a few of you who want to do a certain like activity or something, and maybe that'll grow, right? So, patience, put yourself out there, just ask, and then like find what works for you in terms of both like the types of activities you're going to want to do, the level of involvement you're going to want to have, the boundaries of what that looks like with like personal connections at work. Like, it's going to be a different answer for everybody of what combination is going to work. So, find what works best. Patience, putting yourself out there, and I think you'll find something that works.
Oh, Maria, this has been a really important conversation. Like we said off the top, friendships, building those connections, sometimes a topic that's overlooked, but hey, the research even shows a really vital part to keeping your work life balance and fulfillment. So we thank you so much today for stressing the importance of building these amazing connections. I'm Sam East, and from all of us at SWE, thank you for listening.